In this video, we will be covering the army roster for the Norscan faction, as well as comparing them to previous versions of Norse units found in the Warhammer lore. I will be giving you a description of the unit from the lore, and then detailing how they will function in Total War Warhammer when the Norsca DLC is released. Now, the initial faction leaders for the Norscan faction will be Wulfric the Wanderer and Throg the Troll King. I will be doing individual videos on each of these faction leaders, and so will not be covering them in this video. Now, we will start off with the Norse infantry, beginning with the heads of armies and heroes, followed up by the regular infantry, the cavalry, monstrous infantry, and monsters in general, as the Norscans have a large monster contingent to their army. We begin the unit roster starting off with the war leader, or the Jarl or King. The Jarl of a Norse army is the most battle-hardened veteran of his group, and often a lesser clan chieftain of his tribe. He has seen many battles and is used to the bloodshed. While some Jarls choose to command their forces with strategy, most just run into the fray with the rest of the warriors. However, the Jarl decides to run his force. All of the other warriors respect him and look up to him. The Jarl is a great warrior, loyal to his tribe's king. In exchange for his devoted service, the king grants the Jarl hunting grounds, warriors, treasure, and thralls. The Jarl is the absolute lord of his lands, but is expected to be subservient to his master, and when the winds of war blow, the Jarl is expected to come to the aid of his king and lend his warriors for the cause. Should the king die without an heir, the Jarls fight a bloody contest to take the throne. While it is expected that Jarls be utterly loyal to their monarch, it is not unheard of for a Jarl to slay his master and usurp his position. Such a coup is always dangerous since it invites reprisals and further treachery, but in times of weak leaders, it is expected for a Jarl to step up and seize power. Now, as far as Total War is concerned, we will probably not be seeing kings, which is why I focused on Jarls. We will be getting the Jarls as actual war leaders in the form of Marauder chieftains, and they will be your standard melee-focused general for Total War Warhammer, and they will be leading your armies, and they will have access to multiple mounts, ranging from a warhorse to a chariot, and finally the mighty war mammoth. And now we move into the hero section, and we will start off with the Seers, or the Vitki, as they are known in Norse. The Seers are valued members of a Jarl's entourage, reading the signs and portents in the entrails of their sacrifice, or translating the flickers of fire to divine some glimpse of future events. Seers advise the Jarls in matters pertaining to the will of their ancestors and the gods. It falls to these privileged men and women to interpret the movements of the winds of magic, the whispers of demons, and the spirits of fallen warriors to guide the Jarl to choose the proper course for the tribe. A seer is a useful source of information, ranging from arcane matters to mundane occurrences. As such, they are in a constant demand by people of all walks of life. Seers often accompany the retinue of a Jarl. If a Jarl has had a weird dream, witnessed a star falling from the heavens, or experienced any other portent, he will approach his seer for an interpretation of the omen. No seer is foolish enough to give an answer that might displease their master, so the truth is always caged in platitudes. As you can see, the seers are the magicians of the Norscans. Though their methods may seem archaic and barbarous, it does not negate the potency of their spellcraft. In Total War, we will be seeing the Vitki under the name of the Shaman, or possibly just Sorcerer. They will have access to multiple lores of magic and mounts in the form of a warhorse or a chariot. The next hero is unfortunately not on the Total War Warhammer roster, but they are in the Norscan rosters, and so I will be covering them all the same, and they are known as the Skalds. While the Norse may seem like a barbaric and uncivilized people without high understanding, they are not without their own traditions. Only the greatest events or stories are engraved in stone. The rest of the knowledge is passed down by storytellers known as Skalds. Skalds are the keepers of lore, the chronicles of the histories of the Norse. Part entertainer, part warrior, these individuals are held in high esteem for their wisdom and knowledge. As storytellers, the Skalds are responsible for learning them word by word and later passing them on to the next generation. There are a few Skalds who are chosen to fill their role as mere children who are really interested in stories and able to absorb even the smallest details told to them. When such an ability is recognized, the child is generally attached to local Skald's retinue, where anything worth to know is passed down, a progress which may take decades. Skalds are almost always members of a Norse lord's court, and so enjoy the patronage of a Jarl, King, or Warlord. This provides much needed protection for the Skald. This is a liability too, for if the Skald seeks a life of his own, he will have effectively snubbed a very important Norseman. Members of Norse society such as Seers and Vidki will tend to give Skalds a warm reception out of respect for their learning. All kings keep Skalds in their retinues, as do most Jarls. When the call for war is sounded, the Skald bears the banner and marches to battle with his comrades. When they sing their songs and tell their tales, the Norse warriors who listen to them become enthralled and inspired of whatever motif the story is about. They fight on even harder and according to it. Now, Skalds act as the standard bearers, which we do not have in Total War Warhammer as of yet, but I could possibly see them being added in the future as DLC as an alternative melee hero that buffs your troops, kind of like the warrior priests currently do for the Empire faction. There are 2 more heroes in the Norscan roster, but since they are monstrous in nature, I will be covering them later. And so we are moving into the actual infantry, the human infantry of the Norscan tribes. And we begin with the Marauders. Most Norsemen are great warriors, blessed with strength at arms and fierce demeanors, but it is the dream of nearly every Norseman to join the ranks of the greatest warriors, to become champions of chaos and bear the marks of their gods' favor. Until they can prove their value to the dark gods, they are simply marauders. Most marauders are the core of the chaos hordes. They flock to the banners of their champions, throwing their weight behind any cause, whether it is the bidding of their gods or the call to battle. When not part of a great army, they spend their time raiding villages of the Empire. Natural fighters, they are hardened by the bleak land and bred for battle. They hold all others in contempt. True to their racial ideals, warriors aspire to a bloody death in battle, thereby ascending to an afterlife of perpetual fighting and boozing. Such are the attractions presented by an eternity of drunken violence that the Norse holds few qualms when it comes to laying down their lives in battle. A marauder lives solely to become a champion of chaos. He knows that many are called, and most die on the way, but that will not happen to him. The belief that he will be one of the few elite, one anointed by chaos, drives him in every way. There is no doubt possible. To that end, he exults in death and destruction, as bloody and purposeless as possible. Raids are executed with raw, overwhelming thirst, not cunning and planning. In the raw, red fury of battle, there is nothing but the whirling of blades and the pure joy of feeling a fallen foe's heart blood spray across your face. After the fight is done, there's time for a breather, a chance to slay the survivors in gory games of torture and death. And as you can see, the Marauders form the bulk of the Norscan infantry, and this is going to be true for Total War as well. In this game, we are getting multiple types of Marauders. We will be getting Marauders with spears, axes, and great axes. These will be your early game standard cheap infantry. The spearmen will have anti-large, which means they will be decent against cavalry and monsters, while the standard axes will be good for just soaking up fire or eating charges from enemy cavalry, while the great axe variant will be your cheaper armor-piercing units in the early game. Now on to the Berserkers. Berserkers are the most ferocious warriors in any Norse army. Raving nutters who chomp on their axe handles, foam at the mouth, and howl with an innate fury that few other troops can match. They have proven their worth over countless battles and have learned that death is nothing to be feared. These lawless, near uncontrollable warriors are considered maladjusted even by the Norse warriors. They can work themselves into a killing frenzy that makes them terrifying opponents in hand-to-hand fighting. Before a battle, they have headbutting contests and vast quantities of strong beer, which leaves them wild-eyed and frothing. In this state, they are highly dangerous, not only to the enemy, but sometimes to their own side. In combat, these madmen work themselves up into an almost suicidal fury and eagerness to come to grips with the foe. Once they see their enemies, they lose control completely, attacking foes many times more powerful than themselves. Berserkers have little care for their own personal well-being, adorning themselves with nothing but war paint and a bear skin. They disdain armor as a sign of weakness, and some even fight with weapons in both hands. More often than not, however, they simply use big axes to cleave through their foes. They have no regard for their own lives and throw themselves at the enemy without a trace of fear. It is fairly obvious what Berserkers are, and we in fact are getting them in Total War as Marauder Berserkers. They will be excellent flanking units, and with very high melee attack, they will cut through cheap infantry, but they don't have any armor, and they will fall like flies to range fire, so they will need a little babysitting. Now we move on to the Huskars. The Huskars form the warrior elite of the Norse armies. They vary in background from accomplished veterans to minor nobles. They have no formal organization in social terms, but are simply a unit formed when the rest of the army's warriors get together prior to battle. They greet old friends, swap boasts, and generally look forward to the coming fray with delight. The Huskars are highly trained and motivated, and although they are an informal unit, they can act together with perfect coordination, only achieved by years of battlefield experience and mutual trust. When they march to war, they march to win, and the timely intervention of the Huskars has won many battles in favor of the Norse. On the attack, or while defending an area, the Huskars are equally formidable. Their blood-freezing war cries as they charge make seasoned opponents pale, while their stubbornness makes them virtually impossible to shift once they have taken ground. The Huskars are also the elite retinue of Norscan kings and nobles. In Total War, we will be seeing this unit under a different name of the Marauder Champions, with axes and shield, and great axes for armor piercing. Now, they have a slightly different backstory, being they're almost aspiring champions, essentially, but they do serve the same role as the Huskars do in the Norscan lore, and so they are your heavily armored late-tier infantry that will more than likely be your solid line to hold your more spongy units together. Now we move on to the Hunters. When battle comes, Hunters gather and use their woodsmanship and hunting skills to ambush the enemy and strike deep into their battle line. For this reason, the Hunters are pardoned for a short period during the battle, but nobody trusts them entirely. After the battle, the Hunters do not join in with the drinking and boasting with the other Norse. They quietly make their way back to their own camp, taking with them any loot they manage to snatch from the fallen enemy. The Hunters are treated by the rest of the army as an unpleasant but useful element, and they receive no thanks or reward for risking their lives on the field of battle. This does not bother them at all, as they are still Norse and the call of battle still flows strongly through their blood and their veins. Being a hunter in Norsca is born more out of necessity, as they have often sullied their honor in some way and have been banished from their tribe. Therefore, they have had to hone their skills in the harsh wilds of Norsca. And in Total War Warhammer, we will be seeing hunters, but they will not be using bows. Instead, they will be using axes and javelins. Now, the javelin unit is actually more akin to the whaling unit from Norscan lore, and the throwing axes are pretty much a standard, but they usually aren't their own unit. So CA is taking a different approach to this, and the throwing axe variant is going to be more of a short-range armor-piercing projectile, whereas the javelins will be a more long-range missile infantry, and these are 2 of 3 actual skirmishing units you have, and so they will need to be well protected. And early game, I could see them being very useful, and we will have to see if they make it in the late game as a useful unit. And we have finally made it to Cavalry, and we will start off with the Norse horsemen. The Norse are much more used to fighting on foot than in the saddle. This is due to many reasons, not the least of which is transporting horses over long distances. The larger long ships are able to do so, however. The fact still remains that the Norse are more comfortable fighting on foot or on the deck of one of their ships than on horseback. The ones that do learn to fight from horseback usually become rather proficient at it, however. Norse horsemen are skilled horse riders that can cause much havoc and disorder in enemy troops. These fast horsemen are fairly common in the southern tribes, trained for war on a horseback from early childhood. The mounts of these skilled riders are the Norsca warhorse. The harsh conditions in the cold regions of Norsca, where the Norse make their home, have created a breed of horses different from their southern brethren. This is not only due to the cold, but also because of the rough terrain in the mountains and the fact that the northern steeds are more attached to their owners. Even though the Norsca warhorse considered is probably considered small in size compared to other breeds used in war. Its size means nothing if you possess great strength and endurance. And in Total War, we will be seeing Marauder Horsemen make a return, but this time they're going to be a basic, fast, light melee cavalry, and they will still have the throwing axe variant of Marauder Horsemen from the original game being carried over. We will also be seeing a Marauder Chariot, which is a unique unit created by CA for Total War Warhammer that will give the Norskins a heavy-hitting armored cavalry for tougher targets. And also, in addition to this, we will also be seeing the return of the Marauder Horsemasters, which will act as a kind of medium cavalry with some decent armor protection and melee stats that will be decent for later game engagements. Still sticking with cavalry, we're moving on into a more monstrous cavalry in the form of the giant wolves. The giant wolf is a large and dangerous creature that roams the mountains and deep forests of the old world and beyond. The hunting packs of these beasts have been known to attack well-armed caravans and destroy them. They are used as goblins as mounts, and most are slain whenever they are seen. To the Norse, however, the wolf plays an important part in their mythology and religious beliefs, and is worshipped and respected as a great hunter. The giant wolves of Norsca are incredibly fast and vicious, and Norse tribes have trained packs that they lead into battle. Now, the giant wolves will be a standard warhound unit actually found in that from other factions that will be found in the Norscan faction, but there will also be a variant of ice wolves, which will have a chilling effect that a few of the Norscan units are seen to have in this latest army roster. And the chilling effect will add a chilling aura around the unit, similar to the Chillgeists, and it will take an effect whenever they actually attack a unit. And it will slow down the enemy and give them a slight debuff. There's also going to be a Ice Wolf Chariot that will have similar effects to the Ice Wolves that I just spoke on. We have made it straight into the monstrous infantry, and we will be starting off with the Snow Trolls. At the peaks of the mountains in Norsca, there are many creatures that rarely ever venture below the snow line. Of these, one of the most common types is the Snow Troll. Snow Trolls are excellent trackers and can follow their prey for hundreds of miles if necessary. They do not carry weapons of any kind, and instead they rely on their wickedly barbed claws to slice through their prey with a single sweep of their long arms. Some of the Norse settlements deeper within the mountains actually have small communities of these simple creatures. Trolls are hulking creatures whose hunched appearances belies their powerful nature. Trolls physically adapt to their environment, and depending on where they live, their skin can be warty, rocky, slimy, or scaly. Despite their many physical differences, all trolls are hideous, slow-witted, and eternally hungry. Being dim creatures with indiscriminate appetites means trolls will eat wood, rock, or bits of metal. Not surprisingly, the stomach of a troll contains incredibly powerful digestive juices. This potent bile is highly sought by alchemists, potion makers, and dark sorcerers. The Snow Trolls appreciate that warlike tendencies of the Norse and realize it is much easier to have someone bring you food than for you to run after it for hours before eating. The Norse bring the Snow Trolls with them to battle, and the special handlers point them at the enemy and try to stop them from doing anything completely stupid. Once in combat, Snow Trolls are devastating opponents, felling foes all around them. Now, the trolls we are getting for the Norscan roster are unfortunately a near reskin of the current trolls in Warhammer, but we are additionally getting, in addition to the standard trolls, we are getting a unit of frost trolls that have the cold, chilling aura about them that some of the other units we spoke of earlier have. Now on to the Ulfwenar, also known as the Skin Wolves. Deep in the forests and mountains of Norsca are many strange things, and like the rest of the old world, warpstone can be found there. One of the strangest effects it has is on the wolves of the area. They eat contaminated food and their blood and saliva becomes tainted. After this, their bite brings a curious infection to the sufferer. When Morslib is high, the warped moon begins to have its effect on the traces of warpstone in the victim's blood. The victim rapidly changes form, becoming a large wolf with red eyes and an insatiable hunger, not bothering to remove the human skin still clinging to its hide. The Ulfwenar, as they are known, can learn to control their tainted lives and can bring on the transformation themselves. Many of them lead perfectly normal lives, and the most experienced and oldest can even resist the change when Morslib shines full. Such individuals are quite common in the northern Norsca, where whole families of these shape-changers live in forest settlements. The war chiefs of the Norsca hold great respect for the Ulfwenar, and they are considered partly blessed by their kin. It has also been known for the children of the Ulfwenar to inherit the taint, and some Norse noble families have a strong tradition of being Ulfwenar. The Ulfwenar are incredible fighters, having long fangs, sharp claws, and inhuman speed. This, coupled with their sheer power and ferocity, turned them into whirling, snarling shadows of death, which strike sudden and bowel-churning fear into their opponents. The other name for the Ulfwenar are skinwolves, and they are being featured in Warhammer under this name. We are getting an armored and an unarmored version of both these skinwolves. They will have regeneration and frenzy, armor piercing, and an anti-large attribute, which is very unique for any monstrous infantry. The unarmored version will be more of a flanking unit, as they have low armor despite their regeneration. They can be overrun if sent headlong into enemy infantry because they just don't have the numbers. However, they are extremely agile and should be able to catch most cavalry, which will make them excellent cavalry hunters. The armored variant, on the flip side, is actually more of a frontline troop and still a late-game armor-piercing anti-cav unit, where they will still be more armored than their regular skinwolf brethren, but they will have enough armor to mitigate most range infantry, I'm assuming, for late game. There is a further progression of the Ulfwenar, and it is the Ulfjarls. Ulfjarls are the princes of the Ulfwenar. They are descendants of some of the most ancient and honored families in Norsca. They have been Ulfwenar for so long that they have completely mastered the control it requires to change form and can even stop at middle stages to become half-man, half-wolf. Ulfjarls are essentially the noble versions of Ulfwenar. Often they are jarls or kings of a tribe, and there are many tales of this gift being passed down through family bloodlines, where entire noble families fall under the category of Ulfjarls. In Total War, we are getting the Ulfjarls as the Skinwolf Werekin, and they are going to be a melee hero, which will function presumably similar to the Gorbel of the Beastmen, as a heavy-hitting melee hero with buffs for your regular army. Now we move on to Mammoths. Of all the terrible beasts that roam the wastes of the uttermost north, few are as dangerous as the great primeval creatures tainted by chaos, and known to the scholars of the old world as Mammoths. These massive creatures, whose footfalls shake the earth like thunder, are capable through sheer bulk and roused fury of demolishing buildings, trampling forests flat, and crushing anything smaller than themselves into an unrecognizable bloody smear. Although not actually evil as such, they are entirely belligerent and uncaring beasts that cut a swath of destruction wherever they go, a factor magnified 1,000-fold by the fact that when they have young, they travel in communal family herds, are fiercely territorial, and respond to any other creature that manages to garner their notice by smashing it into the ground, or, if it is a large enough monster in its own right, impaling it with huge tusks the size of mighty tree trunks. The mammoth is one of the largest land-bound creatures in the Warhammer world. Descended from the truly huge MacLeod of the time before the elves, mammoths are terrifying monsters to fight against. In Norsca, where clouds of warpstone dust occasionally spread across the mountains and valleys, there are certain types of mammoths called Rangir by the Norse that are even larger and more fearsome than their normal kin. These mammoths are much sought after by wealthy kings, who train them for battle or command their Vitki to enchant the mammoths to their service. To the chaos-touched tribes of the northern wastes, the mammoths are living totems of might and power, beasts which go where they will and destroy what they will, and are so considered sacred creatures in their own right. And the tribes which, through fortune, sorcery, or the favor of the gods, come to bring one of these creatures into the fold, garner great honor and fear. The mammoths roam all across the north, feeding off blasted scrubland and thorny barrens, from the shores of the Sea of Claws to the cold wastes of Kadati, are venerated by the Norse. These Chaos War Mammoths make fearsome foes in battle against which few mortals have a hope of standing firm against. The great warriors of the tribe ride into battle on their backs, fighting from fortified wooden platforms. A war mammoth is often fastened in armor plates with serrated steel sheaths on its tusks and spiked collars around its neck and ankles. They have a lone rider who steers his mount as much as he can, prodding the beast in the flank, directing him towards the enemy army. Another use for the war mammoth is as a carriage for huge battle towers that contain archers. These war machines trample into the midst of the enemy, causing havoc. Mammoths are very thick-skinned, and their layers of fur also prevent them from damage, but their stubbornness and difficulty control makes them less useful than you might think. Despite their disadvantages, the war mammoth is extremely dangerous, especially against heavily armored troops, which it crushes underfoot. Now, mammoths are coming to total war in the form of the feral mammoth, the war mammoth, and the war mammoth with a warshine. All three will be powerful single-unit entities capable of devastating infantry. The feral mammoth will unfortunately suffer from the new Berserk mechanic in Warhammer 2, where you may actually lose control of this unit once it engages in melee. The war mammoth will have a set of javelin men perched atop it for additional damage, and the war shrine version will be giving buffs and an aura around it to your troops, or possibly debuffs to the enemies. Mammoths are also acting as the highest tier mount for any lord in your army. In addition to these troops, we will also be getting the Famir as monstrous infantry and an elite version of Famir with great weapons, as well as the Balefiend as a monstrous sorcerer in the Norse roster. If you want more information on the Famir or the Balefiend, see my previous lore video I put out on the Famir entirely, and I will have a link to it down in the description. We will also be receiving giants. Nothing special, just a more Norse-looking giant. We'll also be getting feral manticores, again, nearly the same as what we've already seen in the Chaos roster. And the last new unit we are getting are the Frostworms. In the cold, dark north, and in the highest of peaks, lives drakes that love the coldness found from those places. They are hard to find, and that is a good thing. An ice drake is capable of smashing apart an entire village, and even the Norse warriors are hard put to drive them off. Occasionally a Norse army is lucky enough to have one tag along, should the drake itself deem the intent important enough to join it. However, there is no bargaining with an ice drake. Don't make the mistake of thinking them intelligent, like the mythological elven fire drakes. They are little more than the cunning predators, who will make the best of any occasion. They cannot be controlled, and unlike the other dragons, it is impossible to ride, even if trained from birth. In Total War, they will be known as the Frostworms instead of the Ice Drakes, and it appears that they will be a frost reskin of the current Chaos Dragon. They have 2 heads and all that, but they will have the Frostbite mechanic, which is going to be extremely useful on them because since they're flying, they are exceptionally fast. So you can use them to hunt down enemy cavalry or any units harassing you very easily, and they'll work well with skin wolves or anything else that can butcher large creatures. You can hold them in place with the Frostworm and then butcher them with your skin wolves or any other large infantry that you have. There are quite a few more interesting units that can be found in the lore that I am rather hopeful for in future DLC. Unfortunately, that's all that we're getting for now. But just to give you a little tidbit, there are the Norse Shield Maidens. They would be pretty interesting. They are an entirely female unit composed of women that had to defend their households while their men are out raiding. And in so doing, they experienced killing, and it kind of awakened that Norse bloodlust that can be found in their male counterparts. And they formed their own regiment and unit. And as well as the Valkyries, which are actually similar to the actual Valkyries of Norse mythology, that are sent by the Norscan deities to aid them in battle and deliver fallen warriors to the Norscan version of Valhalla. The possibilities are great, and I hope that we do get a future expansion in this race, because there are just so many more interesting units that could be included in Total War. And with that, that is all we've got for the Norscan army roster. A quick recap of all the units so far is we have Wulfric and Throg as legendary lords. We've got the Marauder Chieftain as our generals. We've got the Shaman or Sorcerer for a caster, as well as the Balefiend. Then we have the Skinwolf Werekin as a melee hero. Then for infantry, we've got Marauders, Marauders with spears, Marauders with great weapons, Marauder Berserkers, Marauder Champions, and Marauder Champions with great weapons. Then for skirmishers, we've got Marauder Hunters and Marauder Hunters with javelins. Then we have, for cavalry, we've got the Marauder Chariots, Marauder Horsemen throwing axes, Marauder Horse Masters, Norscan Ice Wolf Chariots, Norscan Warhounds, Norscan Ice Wolves. Then we move into the monstrous infantry and the Norscan Trolls, Fimir Warriors, Norscan Ice Trolls, Elite Fim Warriors with great weapons, Feral Manticores, Skin Wolves, Armored Skin Wolves, a Norscan Giant, a Feral Mammoth, a War Mammoth War Shrine, and finally the Frost Worm. So that is the entire Norscan roster. We covered it earlier, and that's going to be all I've got for today, guys. Thank you for sticking around as long as you have. If you've sat through the whole thing, it's greatly appreciated. I appreciate any viewership I'm getting at the moment. I have kind of a small channel trying to get my name out, so it really helps if you like and subscribe. Put that little thumb up, leave me a comment if I missed anything. I'm rather new to this lore video, so I will miss things, but that's all I've got today, guys. I have been Jumbo Thick, and I thank you for your time. Have a good day.